Well, hello there, my droogs. Welcome to yet another cat sermon. And I'm in the Third Church of America again because I'm just really enjoying this location. I like it's kind of open. I like the tallness of it. I like the way this is built over here. And we're going to continue to focus on the statue because I like it as an image for the Divine Mother and all that stuff. And today we're going to be talking about a variety of things. We're going to mention Meister Eckhart a little bit. We're going to mention Swami Vivekananda. We're going to mention a few different things. So hopefully today you get a nice sermon out of it. I think you will, God willing. But first, let's start with our opening prayer. All right. Oh, wonderful Mother, please guide us. Please protect our hearts. Open our hearts to you so that you may be there with us. Please let the seeds of mercy and the seeds of forgiveness grow in our hearts. Please guide us so that we may always remember you, thank you, and perfect our worship of you every day. Guide us in our times of need and guide us in our times of ease. Please walk with us, hold our hands, give us comfort in our times of need. Give us love. Let us become understanding. Let us become better every single day. Let us always walk towards you, Mother. Let us each find our path and walk it. O sweet Divine Mother, I beg of you to forgive us for our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Guide us so that we may always come back to you. Thank you, Mother, for everything. Om Krim Mahakalikayi Namaha. Ah, yes. Very good. Recently I've been reading a lot about like various mystical traditions and things like that. And well, I mean, I'm always doing that, really, if you think about it. But I'm also really enjoying this rain. Rain is actually one of my favorite kinds of weather. It always makes me feel calm and relaxed and contemplative. But I say that like I'm not always being kind of contemplative. And, you know, I was thinking about the need for wise sages and teachers in our lives. And I personally think that teachers, can be from ancient traditions and like books and things like that, but sometimes we also need teachers in our everyday life. I personally rely on the Divine Mother herself as my teacher. Uh, and I always read and try to read more and understand more and gain more. And this is a quote from Adi Shankaracharya. Um, Through the company of the wise sage, there arises non attachment. From non attachment comes freedom from delusion. Where there is freedom from delusion, there is abidance in self knowledge, which leads to freedom while alive. And I think that that's very good, but I was also thinking that one of the funny things is, although I like Shankaracharya, he's also, you know, approves of the caste system, and so, I have kind of mixed feelings about him. And what I was really thinking is that part of the problem is that every teacher, no matter how good they are ultimately just a master of their own opinions, and they're usually understanding, their ancient texts, but they're understanding ancient texts in their own way, really. And, sometimes it's really good to go outside of tradition and try to learn better, but also try to act better. But one of the things I also think is the most important is to go out into the world and act. And this is a quote from Swami Vivekananda. The more we come out and do good to others, the more our hearts will be purified and God will be in them. Ultimately, what we really want is we really want God to reside within our hearts. I really like the idea of, for instance, our hearts being a lotus and we want God to be dancing on the lotus in our hearts to rest upon it so that we can have God with us perpetually and we can always be remembering God and always coming back to God. And another quote from Swami Vivekananda here is, "We are what our thoughts have made us, so take care about what you think. Words are secondary. Thoughts live, they travel far." And I've also been reading the Gathas recently, and I always really like the idea of the Spentamainu, the the spirits which encourage good thoughts and good actions. We want good words, good deeds, and good thoughts, good deeds, and good words. And I mean, you can phrase it as good action instead of good deeds. Good thoughts, good action, good words, or good words, good thoughts, good action. Basically, I mean, those three. And it's very interesting to me because if you stop and think about it, those are, the basis for so much of what we do. And it can be difficult to control our thoughts and things like that. But, part of what we do is when at least what I have found most effective is when these negative thoughts come into your head to just try and let them go. And, sometimes it's kind of fun to engage in negative thoughts. I find that I sometimes, for instance, because I love doing Warhammer lore, maybe I spend a little bit too much time in my negative thoughts about certain parts of the lore. When what I really should do is embrace the parts I like and embrace God in every activity I do. And, ultimately, a lot of it has to come down to us making the effort to change and do the right thing. And, we really need to put the time and the effort in, and we need to sincerely try to be doing the correct thing and sincerely try to improve ourselves every day. We need to sincerely attempt to connect with God and sincerely attempt to um, improve and not do the things which we know lead us away from God. We need to always be trying uh, to find the right balance of things. And sometimes though we'll have real difficulty. Some of us, for instance, have more lust in our hearts than others. Some of us have more anger or things like that. We all have a little bit of imperfections in our hearts, right? So what we need to do is we need to try to improve these things, but ultimately we don't necessarily have to try and improve these things alone. What we can do is we can pray and rely upon God and ask God to purify our hearts and sincerely reach out. And that's what we really need to do is we need to sincerely reach out to God, and we need to sincerely ask God for forgiveness and to help us, change. And, it's like, God, I'm really struggling with lust right now. So sometimes you need to really ask God for help. And, you also need to not be so hard on yourself. We're not all monks. So, sometimes having a little lust or a little anger isn't going to be the end of the world. We just should make sure not to indulge in it and make sure not to let it plant its seeds and grow too deeply within us. And, some of these things will come and go with age. Sometimes, especially when you're a teenager, your lust can be a lot worse, or, your anger and your emotions can really get out of hand really easily. But we really need to sometimes go through and hold ourselves a little bit accountable, but don't like try to beat yourself up. And, if you really want to change, then you really need to give yourself over to God. But what you should also do is ask why you want to change and what you're trying to change. For instance, you should cultivate a certain state of non-attachment to the world as best you can, but don't necessarily think that you're going to be like the Buddha, or don't necessarily think that you're going to be like, the greatest monks who ever lived or anything like that. There will probably be some attachment, and you need to work through it, but you shouldn't necessarily expect everything to come in leaps and bounds. Sometimes things will take a while before you're going to be really able to really fully process what's going through your mind and why it's going through your mind. And sometimes you're really just going to need to take the time to investigate your feelings and understand. And sometimes you're going to have to do things that make you uncomfortable. Sometimes you're going to have to push your limits as well. I mean, really and truly, what you should understand is that at the end of the day, it's going to depend on your goals, right? Is your goal simply to live a happier life? Well, then, yeah, then doing a little bit at a time is going to be better for you. But if you're really trying really hard to purify yourself and really trying very hard to meet God in this life, you're probably going to have to do some more. You're probably going to have to give up more things. And, that's one of the truths about religion is that renunciation is one of the most powerful things out there. Renouncing your desires, renouncing your lusts, renouncing the things that eat away at us. And specifically, I think one of the biggest ones is renouncing your anger, doing your best to get past anger and move past it as it tries to, because anger is one of those things that always tries to redirect your mind. Anger is always trying to pull you one way or another. It's always trying to pull you towards its own desires and its own things. But, really, sometimes you're going to have to do the uncomfortable and sit with it and understand it and let it pass, or, like master it in your own way. But I think the most effective is to sit with it, really examine why you're angry. And I think one of the most effective things is to, if you can meditate on your anger and really see what it is, you'll find that it's actually a lot easier to deconstruct. But it can be, a really uncomfortable and difficult process at first. You're gonna have to take time. You're gonna have to really understand that you don't need to be attached to every single emotion and feeling that goes through your mind. That you don't really have to give in to everything that goes through your mind, and very specifically, you don't have to um, always run after. Like you're gonna get an angry thought. That doesn't mean that you have to follow up your angry thought with more thoughts, or instead you can just observe. It's much better to just observe that there was an angry thought and then, sit with it for a little while, let it be. Don't like really engage with it. Um, this is another quote from Swami Vivekananda. Comfort is no test of truth. Truth is often far from being comfortable. And sometimes you're going to have to deal with the truth that you do need to change and that you do need to understand your emotions and, kind of work through them and understand that they're not always, just because you feel something doesn't make it correct. Just because you feel angry doesn't mean that you should feel angry. Just because you feel sad doesn't mean you should feel sad, etc., etc. We live in a culture which really glorifies the idea of our feelings being like the end all be all, but in truth, our feelings are just that. They are feelings. And sometimes they can be very good, and if you direct them and use them in the correct way, if you find ways to cultivate proper feelings like love of God and love of people, then yeah, your feelings can be great. But a lot of times, feelings are really bad. They can actually really mess with you and really hurt you if you don't, try to understand them and you don't try to gain some control over them. And sometimes it's just like, I just feel a way, and people will say things like that to me, and it's like, well, I understand that you feel a way, but I've felt a lot of different things in the past too, and I've managed to get over the vast majority of them with meditation and effort and, right concentration and things like that. And I think that's the much better thing. Or, turn those emotions and turn them towards God. I find that that's probably one of the most useful and best things. Turn your lust, your greed, all your other things, turn it towards God. Become greedy for God. Want God in everything. You know, lust after God. Always be trying to gain God's love. Always be thinking about God's love. Always be thinking about the beauty and the great purpose of God. Always be thinking about the truth that you're trying to impart, and always be thinking about what you want out of your relationship with God, and think about like you want that love, so you're going to need to put the effort in to cultivate that love. It's like a seed. You're gonna need to water the seed, or like when you're doing a good way I've heard it being said is when you're uh doing things that you really love, think about God in those instances and dedicate your actions to God. Like, I like painting my Warhammer figures. I like playing with my Warhammer figures. I like playing Warhammer. Just, why not dedicate even something like that to God? Dedicate everything you're doing to God. Dedicate, when you're sleeping in bed, dedicate it to God. Dedicate your cuddling with your pillow. Dedicate that to God. Why not? Why not really and truly embrace these things and really and truly um, embrace these ideas and this holy nature that we're able to have, and remember that ultimately you and God are connected and are one. And here's a good quote from Meister Eckhart: the eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. My eye and God's eye are one seeing, one knowing, one love. Remember that thou art. Remember that we are always connected to God and that we can always come back to God and rely on God. If we need comfort, if we need a moment of rest, we can always come back to God. I often, since I'm a kitty cat, I often like to imagine laying in God's lap and having her pet my little head and scritch me and having a nice little comforting time. And even if I'm having a really really bad day for whatever reason, or well, I don't get too many bad days now, thankfully, thank God, because of my um thankfully because of my spiritual insights and the things that God has given me. you know Even if I was having a bad day, I could always just think about being in God's lab, being safe and protected and loved. And thinking about like God's love in the world, and thinking about, even though there are so many difficulties, so many dangers, so much supposed evil in the world, really it's all God, and that God is ever pervasive, all loving, and always there. And this is another quote from Meister Eckhart that I like a lot: is if the only prayer you said was thank you, that would be enough. You should be thanking God. You should thank God every day. And yeah, things can be very difficult, and I understand that. I'm not saying that you're not going to have difficulties, you're not going to have moments where you're going to have to really try hard to reflect and understand what's going on and why it's going on, and why something's happening that you don't like. And maybe sometimes you're going to have to change your actions or change your course or change your desires, but God is there for you. And hopefully you can think of this place, this kitty cat sermon and this cat church, as a place for you to come, where there's the love of Jesus Christ, there's the love of Ma Kali, there's the love of Krishna, are all here, and we can all share this love and hopefully grow together and really become um, one together, and really come to love and understand each other, and really also come to cultivate the seeds of forgiveness and the seeds of mercy within our own hearts. I think that is ultimately what we should be doing, and that we should be trying to create the sage within ourselves. And whether we approach it through the path of knowledge or the path of devotion and love or the path of karma yoga or whatever, I think ultimately all of our paths will lead us to God if we are sincere in our journey. And that's just what I wanted to say today. So I'm going to end it with a nice little prayer. Oh, sweet Divine Mother, please guide us. Give us warmth and love in our hearts. Give us understanding. Give us truth. Give us power. Give us the power to be with our emotions and endure them, and also to understand what they really are and to look past them. Give us the truth and the power to always come to you and to always see you in all things. Guide us from the unreal to the real. Guide us from darkness unto light, and guide us from death to immortality. Guide us so that we may always embrace you, Divine Mother. O sweet Lord Jesus Christ, forgive us for every sin that we have committed, and make it so that we can have forgiveness in our hearts and forgive those who have trespassed against us. Thank you, Lord. Make us an instrument of your peace, please. Please guide us. And please embrace us. And please dance on the lotus of our hearts. Om Krim Kalikai Namaha. Okay, well, I hope you all enjoyed that little talk, and I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful and blessed day. And remember to always be trying to be a blessing in this world. Bye bye.